Unshelling Medicine Podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Good day, everybody. Welcome. I have the pleasure of having somebody so incredible with us today. Her name is Simone Sloan. She is the executive founder of Your Choice Coaching. So, hi, Simone. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So, Simone, I'd like for you to please talk about Your Choice Coach. Like, what is that business about? And how did you get to a place where you're like, people do actually need coaching, especially in the business world, in the corporate world?
Absolutely. I don't know if I should start with my journey in terms of how I got there and then in terms of what we do. But we do a lot of executive coaching work as well as the culture work within organizations. But let's back up a bit too in terms of sharing who I am. I'm originally from Jamaica, lived in Washington, D.C., and then went to France for a couple of years, came back. But what really got me here in the greater New York areas here is the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a pharmacist by trade and have worked within pharma, not only on the business side of things, but also on the medical side of things, and have really looked at come in from it through strategic lens. And I say that because when the therapeutic areas that I kind of worked on during that time frame were cardiovascular, diabetes, metabolics, and really working with healthcare professionals, but also with the sales teams. And that's one thing I really loved about the organization is that I had the ability to affect the strategy, not only come up with the strategy, but then look at it and see how it's actually being executed against, and then being able to tweak as we kind of go along. I left that world 12 years ago and started my company, which is Your Choice Coach. And within that space, like I said, we do executive coaching work. We do a lot of culture work. And what really led me to say, hey, this is something that's really needed is my own experience and journey. I did coaching also for about a year, did certification program, and really under the lens of the ontological coaching, which is study of being. And that was the scariest thing anybody has gone through, at least for me, because science brain, very heady, right? They don't talk about emotions that much, right, in terms of what we do. And so this really did a deep dive into that kind of emotional world where you're not really comfortable in. And it was funny because they asked at the end of the first day of the program, who wants to leave? And I guess my face kind of had this frightening look, right? But I said, I'm here for a reason. And so I'm going to stay because it's uncomfortable, but it's a good uncomfortable. And I know there's something better at the other side of this. So that from that experience, it led into the more of the emotional intelligence and touched into cultural competencies, and then also communication styles with the DISC assessments and things of that nature. So that's sort of like my journey into the coaching realm. And I think that as I looked back at my experience and how I felt, I said, we don't get to talk about these types of things in the corporate setting, in business, right? And I said, this is something we definitely I want to bring back and want to support and help other folks and professionals like me to excel.
So why do you think we don't talk about the emotional things in business?
It's funny. I was just listening to Brene Brown. She's talking about vulnerability. And she said vulnerability is operating in uncertainty, risk, and the emotional sides of that. And when we think about vulnerability, most people relate to vulnerability as being weak, a weakness, right? And if we show that, oh my God, they're going to weaponize it, retaliations, all kinds of things that may hamper my growth, my reputation, etc. And, what's interesting is what I've learned over my years of business and also just in terms of working with different organizations is that's how we connect, right? That's exactly how we connect to others. And if we're not, and I'm not saying, and I love what she said, it's not about oversharing. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's those moments when you can actually empathize with someone, relate with someone, share a little bit of your experiences with them to make others know that you understand where they're coming from. You may not have the same experience, but you get it, right? And that's where the connection comes in. That's how you build trust over time and collaboration. I call it the TCC. So those are some things that I think why we may not lean into it as often. I think things are changing, but I think people are maybe taking it in different stances in terms of what vulnerability means to them. But I think that there's still a lot of folks out there that are guarded and operate guarded and don't really allow for the teams to really innovate, have performance effectiveness, and really step into a greatness that they could really be as a team.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I asked that question because I had a leader who was very critical of my empathy of the staff who reported to me. And her stance was, I don't care and I don't want to know what's going on in their lives because it gives an opportunity for me to feel sorry for them and I really don't want to.
Mm.
So, with a sentiment like that, how effective is that leadership style?
I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it, because I think in today's, what we're going through, and I call it like a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, and it's on steroids. It's the VUCA world, not my terminology, it's out there. And in those moments, people want to know that someone cares about them as human beings, right? And it's not about feeling sorry for people. People don't want to feel pity. That's pity, right? People want to know that you understand them, right? You may not have a solution for what they're going through, but in order for folks to bring their whole selves to work, that 360, they can't just shave off half of themselves and come in. You have to understand what they're going through, what their world is, because it's going to impact ultimately performance. It's going to impact how they collaborate. It's going to impact how they engage with those patients and customers, right? And if they don't feel whole inside, it's not going to come through 100% on the other side.
Right. And I think some leaders lose sight of that because of productivity. You touched on it. And this was where that sentiment came from because you know what your responsibilities are. I don't care what is going on in your personal life. When you show up here, I need you to produce at that level.
It's a transactional way of being.
Right.
And I get you have to be transactional at times, but you have to balance that because people are made up of emotions. We're social beings, right? We have feelings. And if we feel like it's being stamped on and trampled upon, which is really what empathy ends up happening is in business, right? Then they are sort of like a disconnect takes place over time. Being resigned to the work takes place over time. And they too become transactional in how they show up for the work.
For general longevity of a team, if in your practice you go in and in your observation, an assessment of the team, you see this transactional interaction going on, is there a way for that team to revert to basis and rebuild? Or would you just what would be your approach to a team that you observe, that transactional interaction?
Absolutely. We call that that's where the cultural assessment comes in terms of really understanding the culture within the organization. And it takes twofold. I love talking to people. So we set up an opportunity where we have one-on-ones with folks or maybe focus groups with folks to talk about some of the things that are happening, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. That's so cathartic for some folks because they've been holding things in for so long. And, emotions come out in those conversations. We build the environment where there's so much trust that they're willing to share things that they have not shared with anybody across the organization. And then what we also layer that on top of once we've gotten that information is maybe either if they've never done an employee survey, we introduce that. Or we can do, if they've done that, then let's layer on like another cultural assessment, like a Barrett culture assessment piece for that. And it helps to not only hear what we're saying, the qualitative, but the quantitative information comes into play. And then we marry those two pieces together. And it amplifies where people are on that quantitative level. What are really meaningful to them? Where are they on the bar from trust to collaboration to relationships? And it's so an eye-opening. And then from that, the qualitative and the quantitative, we then look at, okay, here are the breakdowns that we're experiencing, right? And have conversations with the leaders to find out what is the culture you're really trying to build? What is it that you really want? To then help co-create strategies to get them there. Is it a quick fix, one and done? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It takes a lot of work. And you will go forward and you might step backwards a little bit as well because new people come on board, you have attrition, etc. But I think that if you have that goal in mind in terms of how you want to be as an organization culturally, right? There are behaviors that have to be demonstrated. Leadership has to lead by example. And so there are a lot of different things that come into play to help evolve it over time.
Yeah. How do you react, or how do you not reaction? How do you manage leadership that either box rejects or feel slighted or the ego is bruised from employee feedback?
Yeah, boy. Yeah, it's something
I've
you
seen
have. We tell them that we're not here to go rah rah rah. You're the
Right,
best. You're the best. That's not what you're here to pay us for. We're here to understand where the power leaks are within the organization. That's disempowering performance effectiveness.
mm,
And if we're able to like hone in on one or two or three of those behaviors and really double down on them and really understand the root causes, it's a turning point, energy shift. And you're going to get twice as much productivity from them. But you have to pay attention to what these leaks are within the organization. Otherwise, everyone is just walking over it, ignoring it, and the elephant gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Until people start, there are consequences to that, which might lead to attrition.
right. So attrition is not something that let me not say most, because some I've seen leaders that are concerned. Attrition is not something some leaders are concerned about. They just chalk it up to, people come, people go. And some are usually in denial of a toxic workplace culture, behaviors from, say, leaders that they have personal relationships with, because more and more people are being grandfathered into roles that they don't have the qualifications to be in, because Susie's nephew's son's daughter and my cousin are in the same football team. So so it automatically qualifies her to be a manager of this team. Despite the fact that she is abrupt, she lacks communication skills. She's not emotionally intelligent. you know. So, what happens in that situation?
Yeah, you've raised there are a lot of things in this basket that you just raised. Nepotism, affinity bias. There are lots of places we can go with this. But ultimately, people want to know that the person who is leading them, right, not only has the skill sets that have been there, done that, but also has the non-visible leadership skills too, communication. I call it hot communication, honesty, transparency, right? Openness. And if that's not there, then what happens is that you're talking about eroding trust within your team. Now, remember, going back to I don't know, the 9 or 10 dysfunctional aspects of a team, and Stephen, oh God, I can't think of the author's name right now, but I'm seeing the book right in front of me. Trust is that foundational layer, right, for team. And if it's not there, you're not going to get commitment, ownership, accountability. Right? You may get a performance, they knock it out, absolutely, but then how do they really feel about the organization? Will they go above and beyond the next time? Will they fight for you, right? And have your back? Those are things that are very important that we as human beings think about, because we get attached to things. And when something negative happens to us, we hold on to it. When something good happens to us, we hold on to it. And we have those sentiments and remember those feelings, right, on our next engagement. So, when you think about attrition, it costs. And if they say, it's no big deal, look at those numbers. It costs. It's very expensive for talent, especially these days, right? And so people don't leave the organizations, they leave people. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of reflect on your style, how you communicate, how you make decisions, how do you build team?
Absolutely. So true. People do not leave a company, they leave bad management. what would say you go in, you do an assessment, and under a particular management style or manager, the attrition rate is just horrendous. And you see others in similar roles who are leading in a way that builds that foundational trust within their team. What would be your communication to the leadership on that level and higher up, over evidence of attrition under one person?
Right.
What would your communication be?
I think what you're saying is that if you have a bad manager or toxic
Yes,
manager in one group and but the organization's flourishing in other ways, right?
it may be, but so I'm saying this because I've seen this time and time again, both in a management role and also reporting to somebody where people are saying the same thing as they're walking out the door. However, we're continuing to fill this basket,
Yes.
right? Okay.
So I think it's a couple of things that come into play around that, right? Because, and I go back to culture, right? How do we get things done around here?
Mm.
And when we think about from that perspective, who are the folks that you are promoting? Is it just based upon skill? Is it based upon skill and being able to galvanize and lead and have vision? And most likely you're getting promoted because, yes, you can do the job, right? You can perform. But when you start managing people, it's a whole different animal because we are very dynamic,
Mm.
right? We can be happy 1 minute, sad 1 minute, disgruntled. And as a manager, that's very challenging. And if you're not equipped to handle the dynamics of a team effectively, right? It then, like I go back to the trust thing, erodes that trust, erodes performance at the end of the day. So I think emotional intelligence becomes very important. It's one of the things that we do as a part of the coaching work becomes really important because it looks at how do you see yourself as a leader? How do you build trust and empathy, right? How do you make decisions and how do you handle stress? Because if you're not able to, stress is the number one thing here. You have to meet those objectives. You have things to do, and it impacts how you communicate, right? And drive and lead. So when people are saying the same things over and over again and management is overlooking that, then I have to go back to, well, what's the culture really prioritizing? What's its true values?
And is that usually a change that you see is implemented, or is it usually met with excuses?
No, well, it comes in two different ways. It
Okay.
can come as you're getting a pip out the door, or it can come as we want to invest in this person. We want to ensure that they can get, as we promote them, they can lead effectively, not in terms of just doing the job, but galvanizing and really building culture across teams, right? So those are the two ways in which it comes. I tend to work on the work whether you want to invest in the person. I don't want
Right,
to see anybody leaving, so I
right,
don't do that type of work.
right.
But I do work with those that say we're invested in this person. They do great work. We know they can do X, Y, and Z's. They just need the coaching to become more aware of what they're doing. During COVID, actually, I worked with a senior leader who described exactly what you're saying. I call them the toxic rock star because they've been with the organization for quite some time.
Mhm.
They were rocking it in terms of the numbers, everything you want them to do in terms of business. But
Right,
they also realized that as a people manager, that's where they were lacking. And
right.
that's where we needed to get them up to speed and level up in that same way in which they're performing technically
Mhm.
to that same vein.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's great when an organization actually invests in training people and supporting people in being their very best, because I believe everybody's coachable, everybody's trainable. We don't all come out as rock stars. Some of us have to be polished.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not easy. And it's something, and that's what I love about emotional intelligence is that it is something that can be trained once you get the awareness. You practice it. That's how you get better at it, right? And self-awareness is the first level of that whole thing and understanding where your strengths are, where your opportunities for development, right? And being able to work on those opportunities.
Great. So let's touch on culture a bit, right? Culture within an organization is important. And cultural role and nuances within an organization is also important. Can you speak on the misunderstanding sometimes that happens because of, say, diversity in a workplace, where culturally, for example, culturally, as a Black person, woman, man, we don't overshare. We don't. And when we find ourselves in a cultural environment where sharing freely is common, and when that does not come as second nature, sometimes it can be misinterpreted as somebody not being wanting to be part of a team, or not fitting in, or not being a good fit, forgetting their performance or the work that they do. So when you find those nuances where fluidity is expected, however, we do have what makes us us. Is there something that you have seen and you've been able to address, or at least educate and bring awareness to?
Absolutely. We kind of touched on an experience that I had when my corporate world experience, right? I've been in the organization for a number of years, done all this type of work, and a teammate came up to me and said, "We don't really know you," right? And I was like, well, I could have gone heady and been like, "I've been here, I've done this. What do you mean?" But I took a step back. I took a step
Yeah.
way back, and I really reflected on that. And at the next meeting, what I did do is, rather than start with numbers and projects and who's doing what, I introduced myself in a way that things that people, they don't really know, like if I'm married, if I have kids, if I have a dog, those little things that people can relate to. And after I shared that, I got compliments around it. "Thanks for sharing. That was really helpful," and et cetera, et cetera. People generally are just curious and want to know who you are. And it's not that you have to overshare, but have some things that people can connect to with you. And that's really what they're asking. How can I connect to you as a human being? Right. And that's why I say vulnerability is not about oversharing, like Brene Brown says. It's not about oversharing. It's just being able to, how do you want to find ways to connect to your fellow human being that you're working with 40 plus hours a week?
Mm.
Right. And so for those of us who are, "Oh, I don't want to share anything. I don't want to say," it's a missed opportunity, because look and read. And that's the most part of emotional intelligence. Read the culture, understand the audience, right? And how do you kind of join in? So it's not always technical, because it's about trusting, liking, wanting to work with you. And if they can trust you and get to know you and like you, you're on your way to success.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree with you. The basics: who I am, married, children, pets, likes, dislike, favorite sporting team, all of that stuff, right? That's relatable stuff, right? However, there are places that people do overshare, and people
Yeah.
do get
Yeah.
very
Yes.
emotionally bent over when you don't, you know.
Yes.
And the American working class or corporate world is extremely diverse, right? You have people of different culture, backgrounds,
Um, and that's where the cultural competency pieces come into play,
right?
right? In terms of understanding those subtle differences, understand, and cultural. I call it also cultural IQ, right?
Yes,
To just understand, not necessarily that you have to know, okay, this person is from this country, and this, but from a generalization,
right,
understanding the nuances and how best to navigate, right? Because, for
right,
example, I don't walk into a room and just assume it's because they're all women presenting as women that they're all
right,
women, right? I don't make that assumption. You cannot do that. There are
right,
nuances here that you have
right,
to understand, right?
right.
So I think that it takes that understanding and a strategy to understand who's in front of us, but also the emotional intelligence to know, how do I kind of navigate the person, the culture, to, because at the end of the day, you want them on your side.
Mm,
You want them as an advocate. When you're not in
mm,
that room, so think about what your objectives are. What
right,
do you need from this relationship and engagement? Because that's
right.
what work is in a relationship. You're
It
there for
really is. It
hours.
really is. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and if you
It
don't know
really
what
is.
you want, you don't know what to ask for, and you don't know
Right.
what to get.
Hello. True. I love it. With from your years and experience in the healthcare pharmaceutical industry, and just before we jumped on this call, we had a conversation where you were able to observe a disconnect of sort between doctors becoming aware or being aware of services, tools, aids that can actually help in their practice and disseminating information and education to their patient, and also that disconnect also happening between the patients and the doctors. So I know that your coaching business is B2B. And I do not want to assume that is just within an organizational culture and within staff and employees and management. Does your coaching also address an aspect of the business that could affect their B2C dealings?
What's interesting is that everything that I do with the lens is from the customer experience, and it's all connected. And I say that because if people are disgruntled, processes are not working effectively, it has an impact on that end user, which is the patient, customer, the client, whatever you want to call it, right? When you look at it in terms of how people communicate, it was interesting. I had an experience in this, was it last year? I was within a hospital, and I was just there as an end user. And I saw this person very, very happy, right? And we were just conversing back and forth. I said, how long have you been working here? Because I got my head on in terms of culture. I was like trying to figure this out. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been here for a number of years. And he's, explained, he's like, they treat me really well here. And I get this and I get that and the benefits. And so it allows me, and what's blew my mind, because it allows me to be friendly to the customers, right? Because he's being served from a human, emotional, and employee perspective, and it allows him to transfer that energy to the customers and patients. And I was just like, they get it. They get it. And it was like on the lowest level. It wasn't the senior manager, VP, you're talking front lines, right? So when you talk about tools to be effective, look at the way you communicate. Yeah. When you talk about tools to be effective, look at how you bring people into a decision-making process. If you feel that, I and I alone can only do this, step back a bit. Mm-hmm. They're people. You have a team, right? And how are you effectively utilizing your team to get the most out of them?
Step back. That is something, most people need to hear, because, we take our responsibility seriously. And sometimes we do it a little too seriously without, utilizing the people around. Delegating. That is something that I see some, managers, regardless of level, have a hard time doing. And what would you say the importance of delegating is within the team in terms of relationship building and trust building?
Yeah. I look at it as an opportunity to, one, how do I stretch the individual in a different way? But you're also looking at if they have the professional maturity to step into, right? From that perspective. So it's how can I stretch? How can I scale learning? How can I also look at it in terms of, for me, become a better manager, right? Because it takes time. You're putting someone in a new challenging position, and they may have imposter syndrome going on, all kinds of things going through their heads. But how do you set them up for success? And that's for you delegating your time to support this person in this new role in a way that's not micromanaging, but more empowering.
Beautiful. So an assessment of the person's ability to handle the delegated task is important. Okay. So you mentioned DISC assessment, and I absolutely love the DISC assessment. Let me see, do I remember what? I think I was like an I. I was never a D. I think I was between an I and an S.
Okay.
There was no, I don't think I had any D. I and S, I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're on the other half of the spectrum.
I'm more a democratic, empathetic leader. I'm not like, and I'm not like laid back, like whatever, I'm more in the middle, we're low. So the DISC assessment is something that at the time I worked for an agency that actually invested in that being part of the hiring process,
Mhm.
right? And the one thing that surprised me is that we had senior leadership that presented as C's.
Mm.
And C's were kind of like, your laissez faire kind of leaders, kind of like, don't push too hard. So that did surprise me.
Mm.
I see the wheels turning, Simone.
Yes, I'm very yeah. It's interesting, and that's why I said in terms of culture, affinity bias, and what is it that what's really needed to move that company organization to the next
Yeah,
level. And I think I love doing the assessments because it's a guide. It's not an
it
absolute,
is.
right?
It's true.
But it helps us to understand how we communicate, what our motivators are, what we don't like doing, right? And call it out for what it is.
Yeah,
But what I also like about the DISC assessment is that breaks it down to four quadrants: your driver, influencer, right? Analytics, and supportive, conscientious, right? And it also goes based upon the level of risk that you assume also as a human being. So look at your risk tolerance level. Most
right,
likely you're going to fit into one of those quadrants, right? When you talk about it from supportive groups, it's also in terms of, if your organization is trying to get to innovation, challenge, conflict, the S's are not going to be the persons that are going to do that. They don't want to rock the boat. So if you want to be challenged and pushed, you may want to go to a driver,
yeah.
maybe an I person as well.
Mhm.
The conscientious person who's more very analytical, they're going to look at ways in which a process is not working. So if you're introducing a new process, I want that person on my team because they're going to find out what's not working and where the hole is and help us to kind of clog it, right? So each person is invaluable in terms of the skill sets that they bring. It's a guide. Now, if they're not aware of their styles and what's kind of needed for the organization, then that's where it gets friction, right? Because if you're saying we need to be challenged, we need to move forward, then I'm looking for a D for that because they're all about the results and getting
Right,
things done. But they can be
right.
very transactional as well. So that's why
Yeah,
you kind of need to paper that with the I's who are very people collaborative, kind of people motivated. So like
right,
everybody and everyone's not like only one thing. Like you said, your
right.
I, we're all a
Yes,
combination of all of these. We just have
yeah.
dominance. What's a dominant trait
Mhm.
that comes forth most times?
Right. My dominance is definitely an I. We'll get the results, but we don't have to die in the process. Let's not kill each other. We'll get there.
Love it.
That's my dominance. Yes, we get it. Yes, we'll get there. However, let's hold hands. Let's get there. The D is like, I don't care about your hand. Let's go.
And it's also how you communicate because if your person
It's
is going
true.
to tell a long story to a person who's a
Yeah.
driver, you've
Right.
lost them. They want to know
Yeah.
1+1 = 2, and
That's it.
why do we have a rabbit in the story? So
It's
you have
true.
to understand our audience, know
So
your
perfect.
audience.
That is so perfect. The way he said, why is the rabbit here? Because I don't, why is he here? How is this relevant? Oh, goodness, yes. So, yeah, that is something that in my assessment, in my experience and outlook, however, these things do change with time. I know I'm still an I, but I believe I have more presenting these sometimes. I think over the years with having my own, business and things of that nature, you can't help but, have the presentation along the way. So
Right.
is this a tool that, you would recommend companies, adopt at some point, either during the hiring process, an assessment during the hiring process, or maybe evaluation or reevaluation stages, whether it's year end, mid-year for the employees?
But I think they utilize it too as a hiring, but I wouldn't use it as a hiring absolute tool, just as
Yes.
awareness in terms of where this person
In
might
terms of
fall.
awareness, yes.
Absolutely. And I think also another great step is when you are promoting that independent contributor to manager, leading people, or even one who is going to have dotted lines into various folks, right? That's a really great tool for self-awareness because they have lots of stakeholders that they are managing. They need to understand themselves first, also from that perspective, and it allows them to be effective with the audience, right? From that, just a self-awareness and practicing. So definitely, I'd like that tool from that perspective.
Absolutely. So we have had such a hearty conversation. And for anybody listening, be a leader, an aspiring leader. It is very important for you to take an emotional inventory, I would say. You know, again, let me just pose this to you, Simone. Before leadership, calls you on your stuff, how important is it for you to know thyself
Mm,
and call yourself out on your stuff? Also, be honest in your assessment.
absolutely. We all have blind spots, right? Dead angles, or however we want to do it, but we have things that we don't see.
Mm,
And I think it's important at times to get that honest feedback. Again, going vulnerable, getting the hard feedback and asking others for that feedback. But knowing too, if they give you the honesty, there's no retaliation in this. It's just you listening to the feedback and reflecting on it. Do you have to change everything? No, pick one or two things that you want to work on as part of your development and growth. But we all have them. And the more that we are aware of it, that's how we become better humans.
Self-assessment is important. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. However, strive to bring your best self to the table. It'll help. So, huh? We can continue this conversation. There's so many questions I have.
Absolutely.
So many
Absolutely.
aspects we can touch on. Is there one thing that you can leave our listeners with, be it managers on any level, right? And also people in a position to make decisions, especially understanding that decisions and treatment of people who report to you have a direct effect on your bottom line, on your customers.
Sure.
What is the one thing that you would like everybody to be aware of or at least pay attention to?
Sure. It's something that my partner and I came up with. It is called CARLE, CARLE. Be
Mm,
curious, agility, resiliency, lead by example, and empathy.
wow. Who knew Carl could be so appealing? Oh my goodness, that is wow. That is a lot. That's a whole lot in a very short acronym. And how many leaders do you feel practice or implement Carl into the leadership
Mm.
naturally?
You have some that are really good, and those are the managers that you ring and holler out to and high five to, and you will always remember.
Mm,
But unfortunately, it's the negative experiences that get stuck in our heads. And
true.
so if we're not doing the curiosity piece and there's more judgment and assumptions that come into play in the conversations, it
Right.
can hamper growth, right? It can hamper relationships and just overall employee experience.
I love it. So if somebody's listening to us and they're like, you know what, my organization is in a place where it needs an evaluation, it needs a reassessment or assessment of sort because we value our managers, we value our employees, we value the business that we do and our customers. How can they reach out to you? How can they, work with you to come in and help them?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Simone Sloan. You can visit our website, yourchoicecoach.com. And then I'll also include, if I can, a link to one of the books a collaboration book that I just wrote back in September, Leaving Your Legacy. I'm chapter 10. So I'm all about trust, connections, and collaborations. And I talk about this journey in terms of leadership and things and questions people should ask.
Beautiful. And we are going to make all of that available in the show notes. So you're listening, you're paying attention to everything someone is saying, great. Don't worry about writing it down. And if you've written it down, great, good for you. But we will also make it available just in case you miss a letter or two, right? We'll make it available in the show notes so you can click right into Simone's LinkedIn account. So you get right there. You see her beautiful profile picture, reach out, send her a message. The website will be there and also the book. So It was a pleasure having you, Simone. This was such a great conversation. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Let us know what you think about this conversation. Engage, and we'd like to hear from you. All right? Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourselves. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.